Hello, welcome to another episode of Mind to Mind. My name is Evelyn, and this is our 20th episode, guys. We are so excited, and we'll begin once more by introducing ourselves. Would you like to start, Dr. Daniel?
Sure. Yes. This is our 20th program, which is hard for me to imagine, but we've been doing this over a year now and really enjoying it. I think our first program was on introducing ourselves. So we
Yeah.
thought we would do a little bit more of that today. I'm a psychologist in Kansas City, Missouri, in the middle of the United States. And I've been a therapist for over 50 years. I have a family and a dog, and I'm a little bit retired now. I'm not working as much as I used to work. Right now, my work includes doing some therapy, um, and I do evaluations for lawyers and the courts on various topics, both criminal and civil law. And then I also work with a number of school systems on identifying kids that might potentially be violent and doing what we call a violence risk assessment for those kids to see if they need special attention or support in the school system. Most of the kids that I evaluate are not really prone to be violent, but they usually have emotional problems or family problems, and so that I make recommendations about how those might be approached. And Evelyn and I have never met in person. We've just been introduced to each other by a mutual friend of ours, and we've been doing our program now for over a year. In the next number of programs, we thought we might incorporate some guest speakers that might be interviewed by us and might have something special to offer. By the way, all of our programs are available on LinkedIn and YouTube and Facebook. Uh, Evelyn can provide links if you want that. I have 4 children, and my wife was formerly a lawyer. She's retired. Um, anyway, so that's a little something about me. I have a sense of humor, and I love teasing Evelyn. So that may happen now and then.
Yeah. I think you forgot that you write for a local paper.
Well,
You're
that's right.
involved.
Yes, I write an article on mental health every other week for a newspaper here, and I've been doing that for 3.5 years now. So I just the other day wrote my 90th article, and the first number of articles, 80 some articles, I have just recently published in a book that is available on Amazon. It's called Caring for the Mind,
Yeah.
which is the topic of my column.
Yeah.
Our show is called Mind to Mind, the show we're doing right now. So it's very similar. And if you want to get one of those books, it has all of my previous essays in it. That's been challenging and very rewarding to think
Yeah.
of a topic every other week to write about.
Yeah. And we have been using some of those articles to create topics for the show.
Yes.
So if you'd like to get any of our shows, you can check out our platforms on YouTube. We are on Facebook. and we are on Twitter and LinkedIn. And most of those, actually, all 20 episodes are available online. So if you've missed any of them, you can still go ahead and um, go through them. They
Uh-huh.
are each like about an hour, and yeah, you'll get some insights there. And
I might
I,
add, let me add one thing. I'll give
uh-huh.
you my email address, and anyone who's watching can just email me anytime you would want to, asking questions or giving us ideas for future topics. My email is Daniel, Daniel, PSY,
Mhm.
like psychology, Daniel, PSY, at AOL.com.
Mm. Yeah, he's very quick with email. So in case you have any questions, you'd like to have like a one-on-one session, based on whatever it is that you're going through, and you'd like to have like a session with him, he's very open to doing that as well.
Sure.
Yeah.
Anyway,
So,
Evelyn, tell us something about you.
oh, you have an interesting introduction. So I am Evelyn Njeri. I am a mental health advocate and practitioner. Um, my desire to actually do mental health advocacy came from um, just observing like what I had a family member who went through a mental health issue, that is depression, and going through that with them and being a caregiver, and also understanding like what the system is like, the stigmatization going on, and some of the things that could have been prevented were mostly an awareness issue. So like, I don't know, I just like what Michael Jackson said, if you want to make a change, like start with the man in the mirror. And I think that's my policy in life. So um I decided to start an awareness campaign of mental health, discussing different topics. And I do believe by educating the world about mental health, it is really important, because people are able to know what to do and how to handle various situations. I am also a project manager by profession. I work with a company called Mawaida Africa, and it is basically mostly about branding, marketing, and PR. And I most of our clients are basically about they're basically about um, their corporate clients. We also have like festival clients, music, which brings me back to um, this other side of my life. I am very artistic, very creative. I'm a singer, songwriter. I paint, I draw. Yeah, and I'm also a pretty good dancer. Yeah, so yeah, basically, I think that's more about me. I also write articles. And yeah, so I used to write mental health articles or different types of articles. And that's how I met our mutual friend, um, James, who really liked what I was doing. And that's the reason as to why he decided to introduce me to Dr. Daniel Claiborne. And the like the news say, the rest is history. Here we are 1 year later.
Mhm. I think
Yeah.
my impression of you, Evelyn, is that your specialty really is communication in many
Oh.
in many forms.
Uh-huh.
I mean, you have many other abilities and strengths, but that's the one that has impressed me the most. You really
Wow.
understand, you like understanding people, and you're
Mhm.
really good at communicating. And as we go along with our program today, you'll see that Evelyn a lot of times will ask questions or bring up something from her perspective that stimulates me to explain some psychological concept,
Yeah.
perhaps. It's really a nice combination.
Wow. That's amazing. Thank you so much, Dr. Daniel Claiborne.
Uh-huh. Sure.
Yeah.
So, our topic today is how do we face and cope with our limitations in life? Things we
Mm,
are dealing with that we have either no control over or only a little bit of control. They're things that limit us in some way. And when I was thinking about this, at first, I thought about people in older age with health
yeah.
issues and some things like that. There are many, many different kinds of limits there. But then I realized at every age, we have some limits. Like toddlers would like to say things, but they don't have the words. Uh,
Mm,
and preteens and teenagers and young adults, and everyone has limits of certain kinds, either in the outside world, limits of the world around them, or limits in who we are, like our bodies, our personalities, our background, our
mm,
culture, uh,
yeah.
parenting. All of those things can provide certain restrictions or limits that we have to learn how to deal with. And that was how our this topic got started.
Yeah.
I don't know if that Evelyn has any limits herself, but just teasing. But we do at all ages. As we grow up, we run into things that are beyond our control.
Yeah.
One is, and we have this in our culture here in the United States too, is whatever our ethnic background is, how that is perceived by others can become a
Mm,
limitation. So in the United States, if a person is black or Hispanic or Asian, or, you know, for some people, that is perceived in a negative way. And that may provide limits in terms of that person getting a job or being promoted or marrying someone. Or our country is supposed to be a free country, but there are perceptions of people based on gender or
yeah.
on ethnic background or race or appearance, many things that can actually cause limits as we
Yeah.
try to progress through life.
Yeah. Um, I think it's so fascinating that some of these limitations, could you say that they are triggered by maybe beliefs, values, virtues, and maybe upbringing and background?
Yes, yes. I mean, well, for example, when I was growing up, um, I knew I was going to go to college, but I didn't know anything about what college would be about. And my parents didn't tell me anything about it.
Mm,
So I had to find out for myself what
yeah.
how to apply for college and what it would be like, and um, just different limits of that our parents and their background have on us. Um,
Mm,
yeah, all sorts of things make us have limits. Also, just who we are as a person. If I'm a certain size and strength, I mean, that could keep me from, be, let's say, playing basketball or skiing, or, I could be limited by my physique to
yeah.
into certain things. Um, I certainly would never be a singer or a musician. I'm just not talented musically. Have that limitation. Uh,
Yeah.
so all sorts of, and some of the limitations don't matter. I mean, I might wish I could sing or play the piano, but the fact that I can't doesn't really bother me too much. And then other limitations are very serious and limit us a lot.
Yeah.
So when we run up against one of our limitations, how do we deal with it? And as an older person, and I have certain health issues, and you run into many, many more limitations than we do when we're younger.
Yeah. It's so interesting. Like I was just thinking about like how some limitations are like they're permanent and there's nothing you can do about them. And
Hmm.
then there are some that you can do something about, like what you're saying about like not knowing how to play piano. I think if you really wanted to, you could hire a teacher who can teach you, and it could take a while, but at the end of the day, you'd be able to play the piano. Like, um, yeah, you're limited right now. You don't know how to do it, but if you put your mind to it and hard work, and you learn how to play it, then it means after a while you'll be able to play it. But there are certain limitations that they're a little bit permanent, like like what, maybe ability to sing. There are people whose voices, I don't know, it doesn't matter how many times they are trained, it might be a little bit difficult for them to be good singers.
Hmm. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the thing that we want to talk about today mostly are limits that we may not be able to change. Like
Yeah.
currently, I'm 77 years old. I'm basically alert and healthy and mentally fine, but I
Hmm.
have a neurological condition which keeps me from being able to walk. And there's
Yeah.
nothing I can do about that.
Yeah.
And my eyesight isn't as good as it used to be, and
Hmm.
my hearing isn't as good as it used to be. And so we can adapt to some of these limits. We can try to work around them so
Mm.
that we can accomplish things even though we might not be able to do certain things.
Yeah.
Um, but there may be some that we just literally cannot change. I can't change the fact that I'm male, so I'll never really know how it is in the world to be female. I
Mm.
can imagine, I can empathize, and but I won't really ever know for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good one.
Hmm.
You can empathize, you can try to understand like what a female goes through, but you can never really know.
Hmm. Right. That comes up a lot as a therapist because when I'm talking with a person in therapy, I really try to understand them as best I can, but I
Mhm.
have never really been in their shoes.
Yeah.
I've never really been that person. So I can just get as close as I can to understanding by listening and imagining.
Yeah. But it might be difficult to really understand what they've gone through because you have not walked in their shoes.
Uh-huh. And
Yeah.
as we get older, then things begin to happen, like I mentioned. Our bodies change, our senses may be
Yeah.
different, um, our thinking processes change,
Yeah.
our physical abilities um, become more limited. Um,
Mhm.
so it's easy to think about limits when you're thinking about people of an older age. But really, at every age, there are certain
Yeah.
things that limit us and determine how we can function in life.
Yeah.
Yeah. What
I
have you
how
noticed that one? Oh, go ahead.
I liked how you analyzed in your outline, how like each stage had like you highlighted like in each stage what some of these limitations are.
Hmm. For example, like teenagers, they want to be independent. They have a need to be independent, but they just cannot be yet as
Yeah.
independent as they want, either because of the parental control or that they really aren't working, don't have a job or income yet.
Yeah.
They haven't finished their education. There are certain limits um, that they have. Yes, every age and every
Hmm.
type of person,
Yeah.
you are a unique individual in life, but that uniqueness also means that you inherit limitations on who you
Yeah.
can be. I mean, I could take piano lessons, but I guarantee you, even after 20 years of taking piano lessons, I would not be playing with a symphony orchestra.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, like I was watching a Steve Harvey show like the other day. There was a 3-year old, three. That boy could play any classical music, and
Mhm.
just by listening to it, he could play like um classical music that
Huh?
people go to school for years to learn, and he could just play it out of the blues, and he will play it so professionally. And this is a 3-year old who can't even speak.
Uh-huh. Sometimes we refer to people like that as a savant. They
Yeah,
have a wisdom or an ability far beyond their age
yeah,
that they should have. And that also brings up the fact that we have many abilities. We don't just have limits, but we also have strengths. And so
yeah,
we're a unique individual with certain abilities and potentials, but on the other hand, some limitations.
yeah.
So our abilities and potentials are that could be a topic for a different show, how we
Mhm.
um, maximize our potentials. But in
Yeah.
this show, we're talking about how we face our limits
Hmm.
when we become aware of them.
Yeah. It's so fascinating. Um,
Mhm.
I was just thinking about like for example, the way a mother would want to understand like a toddler and what it is they want, and they're willing to do everything in their power to make sure that the child is okay and they're getting everything they need. And the child maybe is not like is crying continuously. They try to feed them, they try to change their diaper, they try everything, but they are limited because the child cannot communicate and say what
Uh-huh.
exactly is that is the
Right.
problem.
Yes, this reminds me of once when I was very little.
Hmm.
I was visiting my grandparents, and they lived in a city, and I wanted to play in the street, and they wouldn't let me play in the street. And so at one point, I went into the street, and my grandfather yelled at me to come
Hmm.
back and get out of the street. So I picked up a rock and I took it
Hmm.
to my grandmother and I said, "Throw this at granddad, but try not to hit him,"
Yeah.
because he had imposed limits. He had imposed a limit on me. It's just
Yeah.
a little memory from a long time ago.
Oh
Uh,
my God. So you want your grandma to throw the rock at him, but it shouldn't hurt him.
not
Oh,
and not hit him. Yes.
yeah.
Um, One of the
Wow.
things I was thinking about in terms of, well, I'm facing a lot of limits in my life, being an older
Hmm.
person. And so, how do I try to stay optimistic and cheerful
Yeah.
and and calm and I was trying to think of how we do that. And the
Yeah.
things that I thought of were several things. One is thinking about reflecting on how grateful I am for the things that I have had in my
Hmm.
life. So instead of
Yeah.
focusing just on the limit that I'm facing right now, to step
Yeah.
back and think about how fortunate I have been and how grateful I am to have had opportunities and certain things like that. The things that
Yeah.
I have had, um, that's a very important one to me, and it gives me more of a sense of balance, kind of mental balance. Uh,
Yeah.
Another thing that I put a lot of energy into is keeping up my connections with other people. I have a
Mhm.
certain group of friends, and I have a book club and former colleagues that we get together for lunches. And I really put a lot of energy and effort into staying connected to other people.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons I think I do it is because they have limits too, but they may not have the same limits I have. And so
Yeah.
I get a chance to see what their limits are, how they cope with it,
Mhm.
and how they work around their limits, how they stay healthy and optimistic. And I learn a lot from them that
Yeah.
I can use also. So being grateful and then also being connected to other people are two of my favorite techniques of
Mm.
not getting too upset about the things that where I have limits. Does that make
Yeah.
sense to you, Evelyn?
Yeah, it does. But I think it becomes really difficult, especially when you're used to something. Was it like maybe let me take you a little bit back when you started experiencing these changes, like how did you first react to it? Like, were you like instantly grateful? Or how did you instantly react to it? Like, how was your mindset then? Because I think those are some of the challenges that like we go through, especially when there are some changes, especially changes that are beyond your control and they are not something you can change. What is your first reaction to it, and how do you transition that now to being
Yeah,
grateful?
that's a really good question. When I look back on my childhood coming up, I realized that I didn't have very many limits. I had a good body, I had a good mind, I had good parents. We lived in a safe community.
Mm-hmm.
I enjoyed education.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to think of, there were certain times I wanted to date a certain girl and she wasn't interested, or I was not as good at sports as I wish I had been. That was a
Mm-hmm.
little bit of a limit.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but growing up, I wasn't very conscious of the limits I had, which was lucky, just very lucky. I
Yeah.
was safe, and our family, we didn't have lots of money, but we had enough for the
Mm-hmm.
basic things. I had friends.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't really think I became aware of too many limitations until I became an adult and
Yeah.
was in the job market and trying to decide what to do with my life. And
Mm-hmm.
then, of course, as a parent, I became more aware of limits because there,
Mm-hmm.
certain things you can't control about your
Yeah.
children. And so I think my awareness of limits came in more in adulthood. Now that's
Mm-hmm.
not true of everyone.
Yeah.
I mean, I had friends in school growing up that wanted to go to college, but they could not afford it.
Yeah.
And I remember that.
Yeah.
At your age right now, Evelyn, what do you see as some of the limitations you occasionally run into?
I think mostly is um for example, like affording a certain lifestyle that you'd like. So maybe I'd like to live in a certain way, but maybe I can't afford that kind of a lifestyle. Um, like the ability to change my, like some of the policies that are there in our government that limits us when, especially when we're really trying to build businesses, get jobs. Sometimes you like coming across some barriers and gatekeepers, and sometimes we call them like bottleneck people who at like roads that should be clear and should be straightforward. you find that there are people gatekeeping those roads, and you're not able to pass because they haven't given a go ahead. But in the true sense, they have been put in a position where they're supposed to make the situation smoother. So I think like having like a corrupt system sometimes puts a lot of limitations, especially when you're trying to
Hmm.
build a career, build a business.
Right.
um I think as a woman, being the ability to be paid equally to my male partners, you'll find someone who is a man and maybe less qualified will get more money than I do for the same job that I'm doing. Um, what are some of the other limitations? Um, like feeling safe in terms of like knowing that I can walk from here to a certain place without being harassed, sexually harassed by people,
Oh.
by men.
Hmm.
Like those limitations of knowing that I can actually feel safe whether I'm traveling by public transport or I'm going from one place to the other, or I'm doing a certain job. Like the ability to actually go through a day without like go through a day not inside the house, like go through a day out there trying to work without being harassed sexually, like that.
Hmm.
Sometimes it feels very uncomfortable. I have a close friend. She's young, she's like 20 years old, and she this one time she called me. She was feeling so distraught because she wanted to go to school, but she had gone through so much harassment that it had really messed up with her mind. So, like, and the only thing I could tell her is to focus on what she can control, and that is how she feels about herself, because she thought it was her fault. The reason as to why people are harassing her, the men are harassing her, even people who are older than her dad or even her grandfather will still harass her. And I was telling her that it's just like you just have to learn to how to handle it and be so confident that yeah, they will say what they'll say, but if if they realize you're not bothered by them or you don't pay them any attention or any mind, then you would be able to push through the day. It doesn't feel good, it doesn't feel great, but it's something you cannot change. Like it's a limit. There's a certain limit, and you can't go beating up every man
Yeah.
everywhere you care, because at the end of the day you'll also put yourself in danger. It's yeah, things like that.
I think one thing that really helps, and just as you're expressing this, reminded me that uh, these things that are frustrating and limiting and dangerous, one thing it helps is to just talk about it with another person, and that
Yeah,
who understands, and or maybe they've experienced something very similar.
yeah,
Um, you mentioned finances and money. That's one big limitation that
yeah,
is pretty much universal that everyone has. Um, and gender, the way that's perceived, and the laws of any country may
yeah.
limit what you might want to do. Um,
Mm-hmm.
regulations,
Yeah.
job requirements.
Mm,
You might want to wear comfortable clothes to work, but perhaps the workplace requires more formal clothes.
mm,
Or one other thing that I realized when I was thinking about this topic that I do to try to feel better and
mhm,
help that helps me cope with limitations is just trying to do good in life.
mhm.
So I might run into a roadblock here in a certain
Yeah.
place in my life, like let's say I wish I could walk again, but I can't. But if I
Mhm.
do good on a certain day, or help
Yeah.
someone else, or show kindness, or something like that,
Yeah.
it doesn't directly affect my ability to walk, but it actually helps me feel better in the big picture. And
Yeah.
so doing good, being connected with others, feeling
Yeah.
grateful, doing good, whenever possible. Those are
Mhm.
things that I think help us keep our balance.
Yeah.
Yeah, even though yes, they're running up against obstacles and
Yeah.
limits, but
Yeah.
it helps us feel adequate. If we just focus on the limits, we end up feeling inadequate
Oh
or
yeah.
powerless.
Hmm.
So
I think
yeah,
one of the other limitations that women go through is hormonal imbalance. I have met women who like get crazy, painful, like cramps during their period, and not just that, like even like a week before, they are having all sorts of mood swings, and they are not in control of how they feel, how they react or relate with other people, and also having, and I think this is just a hormonal thing that goes throughout like a woman's life. There are certain weeks in a woman's life that she's not totally in control of how she feels, how she reacts to things, and like also wanting to maintain relationships, like find people who are understanding during these periods. You're not, like, you're limited to how people will react to you, and how they will react to how you are acting or behaving at such points in life. um Another one is when you as an individual, this goes for all genders, like in case you get sick and you're not able to like walk or do certain things that you're used to, like you're limited to how people will react to you, not just people but also yourself. And some, you might get support, you might not get support, and yeah, you're also limited to like how people will respond to the situation. Yeah, things like that.
I think probably the first thing we ever experience as limits in life are physical. You know,
Yeah.
I'm a little uh, infant or a person just learning to walk. I might want to reach something and I can't reach it. It's too high. And
Yeah.
my arms only are so long. Or I want to
Hmm.
run, but I don't know how yet.
Yeah.
Uh, I think that our bodies really are probably the source of our most intimate limitations because we
Yeah.
are who we are and we're not going to be different. I'm not
Yeah.
going to fly ever, no matter how hard I try, or
Yeah.
or let's say sing or um, run a race and be really fast, or just those very intimate things, or like as you mentioned, women with their menstrual cycles,
Yeah.
or maybe I want to stay up all hours, but I can't. I have to sleep. So
Hmm.
sleep becomes a limitation on activities or
Yeah.
being tired. I might be doing something that I really enjoy and I want to keep doing it, but I get too tired. So my
Yeah.
body tells me you have to stop.
Hmm.
These are things we probably don't think about that much as
Hmm.
limitations, but they really are. And we get used to them somehow and focus on
Yeah.
what we can do. That's one of the main things to do with limitations. If you come up with against a limitation, you can think about, well, what can I do about
Hmm.
this situation? And if there is something, do that. That's one thing.
Yeah. I think what I'm getting from all this in our conversation is that the first step is to accept the limitations, because if you don't accept your limitations, you may not now be able to come up with ways to cope with the limitations.
And also, I may be limited in some things, but I have strengths in other areas. So to
Mm-hmm.
really invest in those strengths would be partly a part of a coping strategy.
Yeah.
Now, this is another idea that I like to introduce. Now, maybe we've talked about this before, but at my age now, I look back on my life and I realize I don't have much life left. And so I think a lot about existence. What does it mean to exist? And the last few years, I've been thinking of each person's existence as kind of like a movie. Like
Mm,
they're like, they're not a person isn't just a thing, but it's
yeah.
also like a person is a production, a play. Like
Mm,
Dan Claiborn started in 1947 and it
mm,
will end in 2000 something. And so
yeah.
it's kind of like a play or a movie or a story. And
Mm,
so any given day, I have some control over what I want to do with the story that day. I
yeah.
do I want to do something good? Do I want to rest? Do I want to just have fun?
Yeah.
What do I want to do today? And then
Yeah.
tomorrow, I have another day and I have a chance to think, what do I want to do with my story that day? And then when I die, the story is finished. And so
Yeah.
thinking about it this way has given me a little bit of a sense of peacefulness and control over
Mm,
and focus on today. And
yeah.
it's made me a lot more aware of things around me too. Like the last couple of years, I've been more aware of trees and clouds and things that are really beautiful that
Yeah.
I didn't really pay much attention to for many, many years growing up. But
Mm-hmm.
now I look at a tree and think how magnificent it is, and or a cloud, and
Mm-hmm.
or a friend. I meet with a friend for lunch, and I watch this person and really appreciate their wonderfulness as an individual. It's made me a lot more kind of appreciative of things all around me. They've always been all around me, but I didn't always appreciate them. And so
Mm.
have we talked about my idea about our lives are like a movie? Have we talked about that
Yeah,
before?
I think the example that you gave was like a canvas. Like your life is like a canvas, and
Oh,
every single day you add more paint and more pictures into
oh
the
yes,
canvas. And
yeah.
I think
That's
we
another
like
way to
that.
look. Yeah, every day you're adding to it or
Yeah.
taking away
Or
from it,
taking.
like a work of art. Each
Yeah.
person's life is like a work of art, and at the
Mhm.
end, when you die, your work of art is finished. And
Yeah.
that's um, I do remember us talking about that.
I think that's a beautiful way to think about it, because I think like for example, I was just thinking about the way sometimes like there are people who come in and out of your life like on certain seasons.
Mhm,
Like some people will be in your life for just a certain season, and all of a sudden they're no longer in your life.
mhm,
And as much as you try to reach out or yeah, try to talk to them, they no longer want to be part of your life, and that now that becomes a limitation, because maybe you felt they
mhm.
had more, or you would want like more of them in your life, but you're no longer like part of your of or they're no longer part of your life. So I think I was just thinking about what you were saying about being grateful for certain like things, because I think we think about, yeah, of course it's hurtful and there's nothing you can do about it, but you can focus on being grateful for the years that you had with the person,
Mhm.
like, and for the good that they did in your life, the lessons that you learned. Yeah, I think things like that. And it's a good way of living life, living life grateful for every opportunity, every person, um, every experience that you have had in your life.
Uh-huh. Well, what I just occurred to me as you were talking that when we talk about the topic of limits, it's almost the same as talking about losses. How do
Yeah,
we feel when we've lost something?
yeah.
Like in my case, the ability to walk, or
Mm-hmm.
like you mentioned, a certain friend that has moved on and they'll
Mm-hmm.
never come back, or
Yeah,
someone who's died. Uh,
yeah.
and so a little bit is some of the coping strategies of dealing with limits are the same coping strategies as dealing with loss.
Mm-hmm.
Appreciating what we did have,
Yeah.
that, let's say, that person or that ability.
Yeah.
Um, Staying connected to people we have currently,
Mm-hmm.
focusing on how grateful we are to have had certain experiences. Like I've been to Africa twice, and I'm very grateful and think about it often. Just the wonderful experience both times it was to visit Kenya
Yeah.
and the culture and the people and the animals um, I don't think I'll ever go again, but um, so that law focusing on coping with loss and coping with limits are very similar.
Yeah. Would you say that you have to go through the grief process?
There is a process of letting go and coming to terms with the fact that something has been lost
Mm.
and that your life still is still going on. So
Yeah.
you're still painting that canvas every day and you're
Yeah.
still making your movie every day, even
Yeah.
though something has been lost.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. A lot of people think focusing on today is very helpful because you
Yeah.
can't change the past. We
Mm-hmm.
don't know what the future is and whether we'll be able to change it or manipulate it like we want to, but we do know what we're facing in the immediate moment of today, and
Yeah.
we have choices. Another good coping strategy is to make choices and to
Mm-hmm.
try not to feel like life is choosing for me, but that
Yeah.
I have some ability to choose what I do each day. I'm thinking of small things too, not just big things,
Yeah.
making decisions.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's really difficult to, especially when you're going through a loss of something, to let go. But
Mhm.
I think looking at it on a positive perspective really helps. And also, don't ignore your emotions or feelings about whatever you're going through, because sweeping the emotions under the rug doesn't help um, your process of acceptance. Because by the time you get into acceptance, then you are able to learn to live in your limitations. Because there are certain people who haven't been able to move to the next stage of acceptance, and it ends up being they end up stuck in that situation where they are trying to do trying to control what they can't control, and they end up maybe making mistakes, hurting other people in the process of
Uh-huh.
trying to control a situation that is beyond their control.
Right. Yeah, a
Yeah.
lot of times in therapy, we are focusing on a person trying to control something that they really can't, and
Mm-hmm.
they're stuck, like you mentioned, Evelyn, and how to get out of being stuck. And I keep coming back to the one notion of doing good,
Yeah.
even on a small scale. Let's say you're having a really bad day and something has happened that's beyond your control, and but you can still, like pet a dog. You can pick up
Mm-hmm.
a piece of trash on the sidewalk and put it in the trash can. You can say something nice to someone. I mean, and it may seem like it's so small. These acts are so small, they're
Yeah.
inconsequential. But I think they really actually help bring us a certain sense of meaning, and we can do some things, even though we may have been blocked in some other area of our life.
Yeah.
A lot of my work with couples has been work helping people get over being divorced,
Mm-hmm.
and particularly if they're not the person who wanted it, they're the person who didn't want it, but
Yeah.
their partner divorced them anyway, and how to eventually move on with
Mm-hmm.
life. Of course, we know sometimes when we lose a relationship, it turns out to be a blessing in disguise because
Yeah.
eventually we make a new relationship that's even better.
Mm.
That often happens. One thing I think is important for all of us to think about now and then, not all the time, but every once in
Mm-hmm.
a while, step back and think, what do I want my life story to be? You know, and kind of like if you're thinking of it as painting on a canvas, to step back and look at the whole canvas and think, what do I want it to look like? Or if you're thinking of your life as a movie and you're three-fourths of the way through your movie so far,
Yeah.
and you have one-fourth to go, well, what do
Mm.
I want that one-fourth to look like? And just to
That's
think about
interesting.
this.
That's really interesting. It means that you need to have like self-reflection moments
Hmm.
where you're reflecting on where you are, where you've been, and where you want to go.
Didn't Evelyn recently, didn't you go on a retreat
Oh,
yourself?
yes.
And
Oh my.
sometimes that's a very good form of self-reflecting. Talk a little bit about that.
So it's actually it's a monastery, a Christian monastery where you go for a few days. It was Sunday to Thursday, so you get there Sunday afternoon, and when you get there, you go with your beddings, you go with your clothes, and then when you get there, like you. One of the things that we are required is that you give away your phone. So I couldn't use my phone for 4 days. Yeah, and another request was don't speak to the people next to you. Like it was a silent retreat.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so and we had a program where there's a time when you wake up, when you go to bed, what time you eat, all your breaks, and during those breaks, it was mostly during the breaks and during the program, it's what was happening was there were programs about prayer and teachings, and most of the things that we were being taught, the main focus was forgiveness, like forgiving yourself, forgiving others for what they have done to you,
Hmm.
going through like a step by step since you were born, like step by step of maybe people who have hurt you, people you've hurt, like a self reflection of your entire life, um releasing bitterness, releasing anger, releasing like any negative emotions that you have.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's basically you, your mind, and God, and the priest. It was so interesting. It was my first time, and I'm definitely doing it again. I think one of one of the scariest thing was like I'm not in control of what I'm eating. I'm not in control of where I sleep. I'm not in control of like whether I speak to anyone or not. I can't check my emails. I can check my messages. I can't converse with any of my family members. You can't even speak to your neighbor, like people you're sitting next to or sleeping next to. Like it was just interesting. And I didn't think I would survive that, but I did. And it
Yeah.
was so mind boggling. I was able to actually be aware of certain emotions that I didn't know I had about certain people and certain experiences that I think my brain had buried before.
Uh-huh.
And I was able to actually let go. When I came back, I actually made amends with so many people that maybe I had hurt or
Uh-huh.
cut off from my life, or I don't know, like it was just amazing. I was able to reach out and be grateful to people who had made impact in my life. It was just so mind it's changed so many things about me. It changed my perspectives about how I view people, extending grace to people who have hurt me before, and also even like allowing that humanness in people, like when they hurt you, when they their weaknesses show, when their limitations show. And I don't know, like I don't know, just removing those expectations that people are perfect and they're not going to hurt you. Like even having the grace to understand that people like our parents have, they're human and they did the best they could, and they they were living and have been living their lives based on what they have been taught, what they know, and also their lives are limited. It was just amazing. I
Mhm.
could go on and on about it.
Oh no. And I think one of the important things you mentioned was, which we do have control over, is making amends. Where
Yeah,
if we have hurt someone inadvertently or on purpose or whatever,
yeah,
we can circle around and try to make amends. One other thing before we have to stop, I wanted to mention is it's also good, just in a general way, to think about the fact that in life there are certain things that are just they're given in every person's life. We're going to have
yeah,
some disappointments, we're
yeah,
going to have some frustrations, we're going to have
yeah,
some regrets, we're going to have some uncertainty,
yeah,
we're going to have some pain.
yeah,
The fact that we have any one of these doesn't mean we're doing something wrong
yeah.
necessarily. We might
Mm-hmm.
as well expect life is going to have these ingredients, uh,
Yeah,
more or less. Um, that just a little bit of that helps us when one of them comes along, a pain
mm-hmm.
or a regret, or, well, every person's going to have some of those.
Yeah,
Um, anyway, I wanted to throw that in just before we stopped, because
and
sometimes we get the feeling that if I do everything right, nothing
mm-hmm.
bad will ever happen.
Yeah, which is actually not true, and it's one of the things that I learned when I was making amends with someone that I hadn't spoken to for 4 years. Is that like when, like, you can reach out to someone who hurt you and they're the ones who hurt you, and I was actually apologizing for cutting them off from my life, like not extending the grace,
Mhm.
but there was no sign of remorse, and to them they just like ignored the fact that they hurt me, but I wasn't in control of whether they feel remorseful or not.
Yeah,
But I had done my part of trying to be like, I don't know, bridge the gap between whatever happened. And at the end of the day, like, that is what I'm in control of. And I am not in control of how they feel, how they behave towards me,
yeah,
but I'm in control of how I feel. And one of the things that I think I learned from that and I decided was that just because someone is bad to me, it shouldn't change who I am. Because if I am kind hearted and I'm empathetic and I like people and I like to do the like a good thing, it doesn't mean that I should stop being good because someone is bad to me.
yeah.
I can try and extend grace and love still to someone who is hurtful to me. And I shouldn't let them control how I behave and how I react to things, because sometimes we get so bitter and we change who we are because we're expecting people to behave the way we behave, and that is not going to happen because you're not in control of how other people behave and react.
And
So
actually, that leads me to one other thought I wanted to squeeze in, and that is, when we step back and look at what our life, and we try to measure it, probably shouldn't measure it by what we have accomplished, but more by how hard we tried to
yeah,
accomplish things. Because the outcome of our efforts is not completely under our control. Part of it is, but other things control the outcomes. But how hard we try to do something is under our control.
yeah,
And so lots of times when I'm doing therapy with clients, I'm reminding them that to measure their success more by how hard they tried than by whether they really accomplished X, Y, or Z. Because that's, like you're mentioning, some things are not really under our complete control, that's for sure. So that's kind
yeah,
of our topic today, anyway, which is limits. This, I
yeah,
think, was a very good discussion.
yeah. This has been amazing, guys. And in case you have any questions, any comments about what we've discussed, feel free to leave a comment below on whatever platform you're watching us from. And also, in case you'd like to request to be a guest in one of our shows, this is the last episode of season 1, and we're so excited about this. So we're going to begin season 2, and from season 2, we'll try as much as possible to bring on guests. If you're interested to be a guest in our show, kindly send your request to us in any of our platforms.
Or
And
recommend a person you think should be a guest. That
yeah,
would
you
be
can also
fun.
recommend someone you'd like to be a guest, even topics that you'd like us to discuss. And feel free to go through any of our topics that we've discussed. We already now have 20 episodes airing on YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter. Thank you so much. We really
Thank you.
appreciate it. Have
See
a
you
lovely night.
see you in 2 weeks.
All right.